There is a strange moment in life when you realize that someone who once shaped your world, someone whose voice, presence, or approval felt like oxygen, no longer occupies the same space in your mind. It doesn't happen in a single conversation or argument. More often, it's a gradual unfolding. You start to notice the silences between you growing longer, the common ground shrinking, the language you once shared now sounding foreign in your ears. And yet, unlike a dramatic falling out, this change is not driven by anger or betrayal. It is quiet, almost imperceptible, until one day you realize you have outgrown them. You are not leaving in a storm, you are simply walking a road that no longer runs alongside theirs. The Stoics understood this phenomenon well. They saw life as a series of seasons, each defined not only by circumstances, but by the people who walk beside us. Marcus Aurelius wrote often of the impermanence of relationships, not with bitterness, but with the clarity that comes from accepting change as part of nature. He reminded himself that friends, mentors, even family members may be central to our journey for a time, and then, for reasons beyond malice, the paths will diverge. For many, this divergence is painful, not because of conflict, but because of nostalgia. We remember who we were when that person was central to our lives. We remember the conversations that shaped us, the experiences we wouldn't have had without them, the emotional architecture we built together. Letting go can feel like erasing that history, but the Stoic sees it differently. They know that the past is not erased simply because the present is different. What was real remains real, it simply belongs to another chapter. Epictetus warned of this when he spoke of the dangers of confusing what is ours with what belongs to others. Their path, their choices, their growth or their refusal to grow are not within our control. Our task is to live according to our principles, even if that means walking without them. Outgrowing someone is not an act of rejection. It is an act of alignment. You are not saying, "I no longer value you." You are saying, "I must keep moving toward the person I am becoming, even if it takes me away from where you stand." This is the essence of Stoic liberation, not the tearing down of bonds in bitterness, but the loosening of the grip that keeps you from growing. And yet, the mind will often resist. Nostalgia whispers that you should go back, that you owe it to the past, to preserve it in the present. But nostalgia can be deceptive. It paints the past in warmer colors than reality, erasing the signs that the connection had already begun to fade. The Stoic doesn't allow themselves to be trapped by an idealized version of what was. They look at the present as it is, not as they wish it to be. This clarity allows them to release without rancor. They can remember the shared moments without needing to revive them. They can appreciate the role someone played in their life without demanding that the role continue forever. And most importantly, they can do so without the self-inflicted wound of resentment, because they understand that change is not a betrayal, it is a law of life. So the distance grows, and you let it, not because you have stopped caring, but because caring does not require clinging. You trust that the lessons and memories will remain a part of you, even if the person who gave them to you does not. And in this way, you learn one of the most freeing truths the Stoics ever taught. You do not need to hold on to everything that once defined you in order to honor it. In the language of modern life, detachment often carries a cold edge. People hear the word and imagine a turning away, a withdrawal of warmth, a decision to care less. But the Stoics practiced a very different form of detachment, one that was rooted in respect. Respect for your own growth, and respect for the autonomy of the other person to live as they choose, even if it means walking a different path. To the Stoic, detachment was not about extinguishing feeling, it was about removing the chain that tied your well-being to someone else's choices. You can influence, inspire, and walk alongside them, but you cannot command their journey without crossing into the territory of control and possession. When you outgrow someone, the temptation is often to resist the change. You try to recreate the old rhythm, to remind them of the connection you once shared, to persuade them back into a version of the relationship that fits your comfort zone. But in doing so, you may unintentionally disrespect both yourself and them, yourself because you are stifling your own growth, them because you are asking them to step backward in their own path, whether or not they wish to. The Stoic approach honors both sides by allowing the truth to be what it is. You acknowledge the divergence without resentment and without trying to force reunion. This is respect in its purest form, letting the other person live their life according to their own nature and allowing yourself to do the same. Marcus Aurelius phrased it as a kind of double freedom. You free them from your need for them to be a certain way, and you free yourself from the self-imposed obligation to remain who you were for their sake. This doesn't mean you erase them from your life completely. Stoic detachment is not necessarily about severing ties. It is about shifting your emotional posture. You can still wish them well, still share moments when paths naturally cross, still feel gratitude for what they gave you. But you no longer bind your sense of identity, worth, or direction to their presence. You carry the relationship with an open hand rather than a clenched fist. There is a dignity in this that the Stoics prized. It is the dignity of not begging for someone to stay when life is clearly pulling you in different directions. It is the dignity of leaving the door unlocked, not to lure them back, but to show there is no bitterness barring the way, just the reality that your steps are taking you elsewhere. And if life should bring you back together in some form, it will happen naturally, without the strain of forcing it. In a way, Stoic detachment is an act of love expressed through freedom rather than possession. It says, I value what we shared enough not to cheapen it by pretending it can be preserved exactly as it was. I care enough about your path to let you walk it, even if I'm no longer on it. And perhaps most importantly, this form of detachment preserves your inner peace. By releasing the need to keep the relationship exactly as it was, you free yourself from the exhausting project of constant repair. You stop scanning for signs of decay, stop resenting the differences, stop measuring every interaction against the memory of the past. Instead, you accept what remains for what it is, and in doing so, you allow yourself to focus on the relationships, pursuits, and values that are alive and growing in your present life. In the end, detachment the Stoic way is not cold withdrawal, it is warm clarity. It is the choice to step back without slamming the door, to honor the role someone played in your life without chaining yourself to it, and to trust that letting go when the time comes is not a failure, but a sign of mutual respect. Respect for their journey and for your own. When a relationship has been meaningful, it's natural to look back on its best moments with warmth. The problem begins when that warmth becomes a gravitational pull, when nostalgia stops being a gentle memory and starts becoming an anchor that keeps you from living fully in the present. The Stoics understood the danger of this kind of attachment. The same applies to relationships. If you're always looking over your shoulder, trying to preserve the past in its original form, you inevitably miss the life unfolding in front of you. Nostalgia can be seductive because it's selective. It edits out the boredom, the disagreements, the ways in which you and the other person had already begun to drift. It turns the relationship into an artifact, untouched by time, polished by memory, protected from the complexity of reality. And the more you idealize it, the more the present feels like a poor substitute. The Stoic approach to memory is different. Marcus Aurelius often reflected on people from his past with gratitude, but never with a demand that they be returned to him. He could honor the influence they had on his life while fully accepting that their role might have ended. For the Stoic, the past is a teacher, not a home. It provides lessons, reminders, and moments of beauty, but you don't live there. Escaping the golden past trap begins with seeing it clearly. Ask yourself, am I remembering this as it was or as I wish it had been? This question is uncomfortable because it may force you to admit that the version you miss is partly a creation of your own longing. But it's necessary if you want to free yourself from a memory that has become more fantasy than fact. The Stoic discipline also involves separating the value of the past from the necessity of its continuation. Something can be deeply valuable to your life without needing to last forever. The friend who gave you courage in a hard season, the mentor who shaped your early career, the partner who taught you to love more fully. None of them need to be in your daily life today for their impact to remain real. Their chapter in your life is complete, but it still counts. There's a paradox here that the Stoics embraced. Letting go is often the most respectful way to honor the past. Clinging to it can distort it, because you start demanding from the present what only the past could give. You begin pressuring the relationship to deliver an emotional high it can't recreate, turning connection into a performance rather than a natural exchange. By releasing it, you preserve its truth. You allow it to remain what it was, unsullied by the strain of trying to force it into a form that no longer fits. Another way the Stoics avoided being trapped by nostalgia was by practicing amor fati, love of fate. This doesn't mean loving everything that happens in a naive way, but accepting it fully and finding the usefulness in it. If the natural course of your life has carried you beyond someone's reach, there is a reason in that movement, even if you can't yet see it. Trusting this flow allows you to loosen your grip on what was and open your hands to what is coming. Finally, the Stoics would remind you that the best way to honor the people who once defined you is to keep becoming someone they would be proud to have known. Your growth is not a betrayal of your shared history, it's the continuation of it. By living well now, you give their influence a legacy that extends beyond the time you spent together. In this way, you escape the golden past not by rejecting it, but by giving it its proper place behind you, shaping your steps but not binding your feet. You carry it forward as a part of you, but you no longer try to turn back and live inside it. And in that acceptance, you find the freedom to fully inhabit the life you have now. One of the most persistent emotions that surfaces when you realize you've outgrown someone is guilt. It whispers in your ear that you are abandoning them, that you are being ungrateful for what they've given you, that you owe it to the history you share to stay as close as you once were. And if you're a person of conscience, that whisper can be loud enough to keep you rooted in relationships that no longer fit, relationships that actively slow your growth. The Stoics would have seen this guilt for what it is, a misunderstanding of the nature of human connection. They understood that life is not static, that people are not fixed entities. To live well is to move through different phases of becoming, and not every relationship can survive every phase. When paths diverge, it isn't automatically a failure. It is the natural rhythm of change. Marcus Aurelius often wrote about how the universe itself is a constant motion of transformation. Flowers bloom and wither, rivers change course, empires rise and fall. It would be strange then to expect our relationships to remain perfectly preserved, untouched by the forces that shape everything else. From the Stoic perspective, change is not a betrayal. It is obedience to the same laws that govern all life. But guilt complicates this truth because it frames the divergence as an intentional act of harm. You start thinking in terms of leaving them behind rather than continuing on your path. You imagine they will see your growth as rejection, and so you hold yourself back, shrinking into the older version of yourself that feels safe for them. Yet in doing this, you betray not them, but yourself and the person you are meant to become. Stoic philosophy offers an antidote, a clear distinction between causing pain and living your nature. You cannot control how others will feel about your growth, but you can control whether your growth is rooted in malice. If you are walking forward without spite, without the intention to diminish or belittle, then you are not harming. You are simply living in alignment with who you are becoming. The emotional response of the other person belongs to them, just as yours belongs to you. Seneca advised that we should live according to nature, meaning that we should follow the course of our own reasoned development rather than forcing ourselves into shapes that serve the comfort of others. From this perspective, outgrowing someone is not selfish. It is the fulfillment of your responsibility to live authentically. Holding yourself back to maintain an outdated bond may feel like loyalty, but in truth it is a subtle form of dishonesty because it requires you to hide or suppress parts of who you now are. The Stoic mindset also reframes gratitude in a way that removes guilt. Gratitude does not mean permanent attachment. You can be deeply grateful for the role someone played in your life and still recognize that their role is complete. The fact that a book changed you does not mean you must keep reading it forever. The fact that a mentor taught you vital lessons does not mean you must remain their pupil for life. Gratitude honors the past, growth attends to the present. There is also the recognition that by moving on, you may be offering the other person a gift as well, the space to walk their own path without the invisible pressure to keep up with yours. When two people have stopped growing in the same direction, forcing proximity often turns the relationship into a quiet strain, unspoken judgments, mismatched expectations, subtle resentments. Distance, in such cases, can be a relief rather than a wound. In the end, the Stoic way of outgrowing someone is neither cruel nor sentimental. It is the clear-eyed acceptance that life moves forward and that your highest duty is not to preserve every relationship exactly as it was, but to remain true to your principles and potential. If that means some companions become part of your history rather than your present, you can release them without bitterness, without apology, and most importantly, without guilt. Because the truth is, when you honor your own growth, you honor the best of what they once gave you, the part of you that had the courage to change. One of the hardest parts of outgrowing someone is the tension between loyalty and self-preservation. You may feel a deep sense of obligation to those who once shaped you, supported you, or stood beside you in important chapters of your life. And yet, remaining as close as you once were may now demand that you shrink yourself, compromise your values, or delay your growth. The Stoics understood this tension well, and they refused to frame it as an either-or choice. They sought a balance, a way to remain compassionate and respectful without chaining themselves to relationships that no longer serve the truth of their path. Marcus Aurelius wrote that we are made for cooperation, but he also warned against being entangled in the affairs of others to the point of losing your own guiding principle. To him, loyalty did not mean losing yourself in someone else's story. It meant acting with integrity toward them, even if that meant changing the role you played in their life. This is a subtle but important distinction. Loyalty in the Stoic sense is about showing goodwill, keeping your word, and behaving honorably toward others. Self-betrayal is when you maintain closeness out of guilt, fear, or habit, even though it forces you to live against your own principles. When the two conflict, the Stoic chooses the former, even if it requires loosening the bond. This is not coldness, it is the understanding that to serve anyone well, you must first remain whole yourself. Consider the metaphor of two ships leaving port. In the beginning, they sail side by side, perhaps even tethered together. Over time, each must adjust its course to navigate its own waters. If one ship tries to match the other's path forever, ignoring the winds and currents that caught it elsewhere, both risk being pulled off course or even wrecked. True loyalty is allowing each ship to follow its rightful route, while still sending signals of goodwill across the waves. Epictetus would remind us here that what belongs to another, meaning their choices, pace, and direction, is not ours to control. And that includes their reaction to our change. You may choose to outgrow someone in a way that is as kind and transparent as possible, but you cannot control whether they interpret your growth as abandonment. Your task is to keep your side of the relationship rooted in respect, even if theirs becomes clouded by misunderstanding. This is where compassion comes in. Compassion doesn't mean you stay bound to someone indefinitely, it means you treat the divergence with empathy. You recognize that they may not see what you see yet, that they may not understand why the distance is necessary. You refrain from unnecessary criticism, avoid turning the separation into a competition of who is right or wrong, and honor the good that still exists in your shared history. But compassion is not the same as compliance. The Stoics were wary of kindness that becomes self-erasure. Seneca warned against helping others at the cost of your own ruin, pointing out that if you destroy yourself in the process of serving, you are not truly serving, you are simply removing yourself as a source of strength in the world. The Stoic balance, then, is this: remain loyal to the virtues of the relationship, not to the exact shape it once had. This means keeping your commitments where they still apply, speaking honestly without cruelty, and maintaining the kind of goodwill that would welcome reconnection if the paths aligned again in the future. but it also means refusing to halt your own development to preserve a version of the relationship that no longer reflects reality. In the end, loyalty without self-betrayal is an act of mutual respect. It says, "I honor what we shared enough to protect my own integrity, because without it, I cannot honor anything at all." And while not everyone will understand this at first, those who value you for the right reasons will eventually see that your choice was not a rejection of them, but a commitment to living truthfully. Now, some exciting news. Our channel now offers a members club. By joining it, you'll unlock exclusive benefits, deeper content dives, and personal insights. Join us on this journey, and let's build a meaningful life together. And I also humbly ask you to leave a comment, as it helps my channel immensely. If you do not know what to comment, just write "better every day" so I know you reached this far. And don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. But the Stoics approached this differently. They saw the shifting of relationships not only as an ending, but as an opening, a chance for both people to grow in directions that may not have been possible if they had stayed bound too closely together. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself to welcome what comes, woven into your destiny, and relationships were no exception. To him, the divergence of paths was part of nature's design, not a flaw in it. If you and another person are moving apart, it's because each of you is being called toward experiences and challenges that the other may not be able to share. In the Stoic view, this is not a failure. It is life fulfilling its own structure. When you recognize this, you start to see that separation can be a catalyst. For you, it may free up the energy and mental space to pursue the next stage of your personal development, to deepen your discipline, expand your skills, or form relationships that align more closely with who you are becoming. For them, it may create room to discover parts of themselves that were dormant while they were locked into the rhythm of your old connection. The Stoics understood that too much sameness can stagnate growth. If two people continue to define each other in the same way for too long, they may unintentionally keep each other frozen in outdated versions of themselves. Seneca wrote that the wind never favors the sailor who has no destined port, meaning that without a direction, even favorable conditions can become meaningless. In relationships, if you're not careful, familiarity can turn into that aimlessness, comfortable but without forward motion. By allowing distance, you break that cycle. You give yourself permission to evolve without having to negotiate every step with someone who may not be ready or willing to change in the same ways. And you give them the same freedom. This doesn't mean they will automatically embrace it. Growth is rarely immediate or painless. But the potential is there, and it exists only because the old structure of the relationship has shifted. The key is to avoid falling into the trap of seeing the other person as an obstacle to your growth. In Stoic thought, obstacles are not enemies, they are part of the training. The role they played, whether supportive or challenging, was part of the shaping of who you are now. Even if you no longer walk beside them, the influence they had remains a permanent thread in the fabric of your life. This mindset also helps you release the impulse to prove yourself after the separation. Many people, after drifting from someone who was once central, feel the urge to demonstrate that they were right to move on, that they are happier, more successful, better off. The Stoic resists this. Growth is not a competition, and the value of your transformation does not increase because someone else witnesses it. You live your principles for their own sake, not for vindication. Epictetus would advise that when you part ways, do so with the kind of goodwill that wishes the other person well, even if you never see them again. This attitude keeps the door open, not necessarily for reconciliation, but for the possibility that your paths might one day intersect in a new and healthier form. And if they don't, you have still chosen the nobler path, one that leaves no room for bitterness to poison the memory of what was good. Seen this way, outgrowing someone is not merely a subtraction, it is a reallocation of space, energy, and time toward what your life is asking of you now. And just as importantly, it is an offering to the other person, the freedom to grow in their own way, on their own terms. In this, the Stoics saw a profound form of generosity. It says, "I release you from the role you once played in my life, not because it wasn't valuable, but because both of us deserve the chance to become more than who we were when we first met." The process of outgrowing someone, even when done without bitterness, can stir emotions that threaten to unsettle you: guilt, doubt, nostalgia, even subtle resentment. It's easy to let the mental replay begin. Should I have handled it differently? Did I walk away too soon? Should I try again? Without careful discipline, your mind can become a revolving door of second-guessing, dragging you back into a relationship you've already outgrown, not in reality, but in thought. The Stoics knew that the real challenge in such transitions was not only making the choice to move forward, but protecting the peace you've made with that choice. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself constantly to keep the soul on its own course, meaning not to let external events or the echo of past relationships pull him away from his inner steadiness. The first step in guarding your peace is clarity of principle. Before creating distance, the Stoic examines the reasons for it in the light of reason rather than raw feeling. Was the relationship no longer aligned with your values? Did staying in it require self-betrayal or stagnation? Was your continued closeness based more on guilt or habit than on genuine mutual growth? By clarifying these answers, you create a mental anchor you can return to whenever doubt creeps in. The second step is refusing to dramatize the separation. Many people make the process harder by turning it into a moral verdict. Either they label the other person as toxic to justify the distance, or they label themselves as disloyal to explain their guilt. The Stoic avoids such extremes. You can acknowledge that a relationship has run its course without needing to cast heroes and villains. This keeps your mind from feeding resentment on one side and shame on the other. The third step is discipline of thought. Epictetus taught that you must be the gatekeeper of your own mind, allowing in only the thoughts that serve your character and peace. If you catch yourself romanticizing the past, balance it with a clear-eyed view of why things changed. If you start replaying arguments, remind yourself that reliving them serves no purpose except to keep wounds open. The aim is not to suppress emotion, but to prevent it from ruling your inner life. The fourth step is selective exposure. In the early stages of outgrowing someone, you may still encounter their presence, in conversation with mutual acquaintances, on social media, or in shared spaces. The Stoic guards their peace by deciding how much exposure to allow, especially in the beginning. This isn't avoidance out of weakness, it's a conscious choice to reduce unnecessary triggers until the emotional charge fades. The fifth step is rooting yourself in the present. Nostalgia often thrives because the present feels empty by comparison. The Stoic fills that space intentionally with meaningful work, virtuous habits, and relationships that reflect who they are now. By building a present worth inhabiting, you reduce the pull of a past that no longer fits. Finally, the Stoic guards their peace through acceptance of the uncontrollable. You can't dictate how the other person feels about the change. They may misunderstand your motives, misinterpret your actions, or even resent you. The Stoic releases the need to correct every misconception, knowing that inner peace depends on mastering one's own mind, not the minds of others. Guarding your peace in this way allows the process of outgrowing someone to be less like tearing a piece of yourself away and more like pruning a branch, removing what no longer grows so the rest of you can flourish. You're not running from the past, nor are you chained to it. You are walking forward with a mind that remains calm, a heart that remains unpoisoned, and a soul that remains free. Outgrowing someone does not always mean they are gone from your life forever. People change. Circumstances shift. Time can soften misunderstandings and reveal truths that weren't visible before. But the Stoics approach the possibility of reconnection with caution and clarity, keeping the door unlocked, but never leaving themselves unguarded. Marcus Aurelius often spoke of living without bitterness, even toward those who had acted against him. He didn't confuse this openness with naivete. Forgiveness for him was not the same as reinstating someone into the same role they once had. Instead, it was a willingness to meet again without hostility, but with the wisdom of what had already been learned. The Stoic's door is unlocked in the sense that there is no active hostility. You can greet the person if you meet them, share a conversation without resentment, or even allow certain kinds of collaboration if the present circumstances call for it. But keeping the door unlocked does not mean you throw it wide open and pretend no separation ever happened. This balance comes from two key principles. One, reconnection must be mutual and rooted in growth. If you are the only one who has evolved, the relationship will simply collapse back into its old patterns, pulling you toward the very version of yourself you outgrew. The Stoic will not compromise the progress they've made for the comfort of familiarity. They ask, has this person also changed? Have they done their own inner work? If the answer is unclear, they proceed with care. Others may never know these moments happened, but they benefit from their results every time they lean on you. The role may change even if the person returns. Sometimes reconnection means the bond takes a different form. A casual friendship instead of a close alliance, an occasional conversation instead of daily influence. The Stoic is willing to adapt the relationship's shape to fit the current reality rather than forcing it back into its original mold. Seneca advised treating every renewed connection as a new relationship, not as a continuation of the old one. This mindset prevents you from being trapped by the nostalgia or emotional inertia that may have contributed to the initial divergence. You start fresh, seeing them as they are now, not as the idealized figure from your past. There's also a discipline of boundaries in this process. The Stoic knows that letting someone back into their life doesn't mean granting them the same access they once had. The intimacy, trust, and influence they hold must be rebuilt on present actions, not inherited from history. This protects you from sliding back into the compromises you once had to make in order to stay close. Openness to reconnection is not just about the other person, it's also about you. Sometimes, in the time apart, you may realize that you were holding on to certain judgments, resentments, or fixed narratives about them. The Stoic uses the meeting point as a test. Can I see them clearly without the distortion of old emotions? Can I interact without the need to prove I was right? If the answer is yes, then reconnection becomes an exercise in generosity as much as in caution. And here lies the deeper truth. The door stays unlocked, not because you expect them to return, but because you refuse to imprison yourself in the past by locking it. You keep your heart free of rancor and your mind open to possibility, knowing that some people may reappear when the timing is right, and that if they don't, your path remains whole without them. For the Stoic, reconnection is never about recapturing what was lost. It is about meeting again as two people who have grown enough to build something new, something that doesn't require either to shrink for the other to fit. And if that growth hasn't happened, then the unlocked door remains just that, an open possibility, not an open invitation. One of the most overlooked consequences of outgrowing someone is the sudden release of energy. For months or even years, a part of your mental, emotional, and even physical bandwidth may have been devoted to maintaining the bond, navigating disagreements, negotiating differences, or trying to hold on to something that was slowly drifting. Once you accept that the relationship's role in your life has changed, you find yourself with an unexpected surplus of space and focus. The Stoics saw this reclaimed energy as a gift that must not be wasted. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself to spend your remaining days as nature demands, meaning that once time and energy are freed, they should be directed toward what truly matters. If you do not redirect them consciously, they will leak back into old patterns, rumination, regret, and hypothetical conversations that serve no purpose. The first step in this redirection is acknowledging the cost of what is gone. It's easy to underestimate how much energy was tied up in the past relationship because the drain was gradual. The Stoic makes a deliberate inventory. How much time was spent trying to be understood, how much emotion was invested in smoothing over differences, how many opportunities were delayed because of the fear of how they might affect the bond. This inventory is not about blame, it's about seeing clearly the resources that are now available to you. The second step is choosing intentional investments. The Stoic doesn't simply fill the gap with distractions. They channel the freed energy into pursuits aligned with their virtues, learning, building, contributing, or deepening relationships that are mutually supportive. Where before energy may have been spent maintaining a connection out of habit, now it is spent nurturing connections and projects that foster genuine growth. Seneca warned against scattering attention too thinly, saying, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." Outgrowing someone is a reminder of this truth. If a relationship has ended or transformed, it has returned time to you. The question is whether you will spend that time in a way that will matter to you later, or whether you will hand it back to the past by endlessly revisiting what might have been. The third step is strengthening the self. In Stoic thought, the self is the only constant companion. People will come and go, but your character will be with you until the last breath. So part of reclaiming energy is investing it in becoming someone you respect, whether through disciplined practice, honing a craft, improving your physical health, or deepening your moral resilience. The better you become, the more meaningful your future connections will be, because they will be formed from a place of strength rather than dependency. The fourth step is serving beyond yourself. Often, when a central relationship fades, there is a temptation to turn inward in self-protection. While some inward focus is healthy, the Stoics warned against becoming closed off from life. Instead, they advocated finding ways to contribute, whether to your community, your work, or the people who are still actively walking alongside you. Redirecting energy outward in purposeful service keeps it from becoming stagnant and turning into resentment or self-pity. The final step is building a present worth staying in. Outgrowing someone can create a vacuum, and nature abhors a vacuum. If you do not fill it with meaning, the pull of nostalgia will try to drag you back. The Stoic fills that space with intentional living, cultivating habits, relationships, and goals that make today a place worth being. When the present is full and vibrant, the past loses its power to demand your return. In this way, the energy once spent holding on becomes the fuel for moving forward. It powers new opportunities, deeper self-mastery, and a life more in alignment with who you are now. And that, the Stoics would say, is the true reward of letting go, not just freedom from what no longer fits, but the strength to build what will carry you farther than you could have gone before. One of the most overlooked consequences of outgrowing someone is the sudden release of energy. For months or even years, a part of your mental, emotional, and even physical bandwidth may have been devoted to maintaining the bond, navigating disagreements, negotiating differences, or trying to hold on to something that was slowly drifting. Once you accept that the relationship's role in your life has changed, you find yourself with an unexpected surplus of space and focus. The Stoics saw this reclaimed energy as a gift that must not be wasted. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself to spend your remaining days as nature demands, meaning that once time and energy are freed, they should be directed toward what truly matters. If you do not redirect them consciously, they will leak back into old patterns, rumination, regret, and hypothetical conversations that serve no purpose. The first step in this redirection is acknowledging the cost of what is gone. It's easy to underestimate how much energy was tied up in the past relationship because the drain was gradual. The Stoic makes a deliberate inventory: how much time was spent trying to be understood, how much emotion was invested in smoothing over differences, how many opportunities were delayed because of the fear of how they might affect the bond. This inventory is not about blame. It's about seeing clearly the resources that are now available to you. The second step is choosing intentional investments. The Stoic doesn't simply fill the gap with distractions. They channel the freed energy into pursuits aligned with their virtues, learning, building, contributing, or deepening relationships that are mutually supportive. Where before, energy may have been spent maintaining a connection out of habit, now it is spent nurturing connections and projects that foster genuine growth. Seneca warned against scattering attention too thinly, saying, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." Outgrowing someone is a reminder of this truth. If a relationship has ended or transformed, it has returned time to you. The question is whether you will spend that time in a way that will matter to you later, or whether you will hand it back to the past by endlessly revisiting what might have been. The third step is strengthening the self. In Stoic thought, the self is the only constant companion. People will come and go, but your character will be with you until the last breath. So part of reclaiming energy is investing it in becoming someone you respect, whether through disciplined practice, honing a craft, improving your physical health, or deepening your moral resilience. The better you become, the more meaningful your future connections will be, because they will be formed from a place of strength rather than dependency. The fourth step is serving beyond yourself. Often, when a central relationship fades, there is a temptation to turn inward in self-protection. While some inward focus is healthy, the Stoics warned against becoming closed off from life. Instead, they advocated finding ways to contribute, whether to your community, your work, or the people who are still actively walking alongside you. Redirecting energy outward in purposeful service keeps it from becoming stagnant and turning into resentment or self-pity. The final step is building a present worth staying in. Outgrowing someone can create a vacuum, and nature abhors a vacuum. If you do not fill it with meaning, the pull of nostalgia will try to drag you back. The Stoic fills that space with intentional living, cultivating habits, relationships, and goals that make today a place worth being. When the present is full and vibrant, the past loses its power to demand your return. In this way, the energy once spent holding on becomes the fuel for moving forward. It powers new opportunities, deeper self-mastery, and a life more in alignment with who you are now. And that, the Stoics would say, is the true reward of letting go, not just freedom from what no longer fits, but the strength to build what will carry you farther than you could have gone before. And that is not a tragedy. It is simply life in its honest and unvarnished form. The Stoics saw this as part of the natural order. Marcus Aurelius would remind himself that people are like leaves on a tree. Some stay longer, some fall sooner, and new ones always emerge. To cling desperately to those who have fallen is to fight the seasons themselves, and no one wins that battle. What you can do is honor the time they were part of your life and then let the wind carry you forward without dragging the weight of what has already passed. In this way, outgrowing someone becomes less about loss and more about alignment. You are no longer measuring your steps by someone else's stride. You are no longer bending yourself into the shape they knew you in. You are walking your own path, not in isolation, but in integrity. And this integrity allows you to meet the future without the quiet resentment that comes from holding yourself back. The beauty of the Stoic approach is that it leaves no room for the poisons of bitterness, guilt, or longing that turns sour. You do not vilify the person to justify your growth. You thank them for the part they played in it. You do not carry the guilt of having left them. You recognize that you simply continued walking when your paths diverged. You do not cling to a paralyzing nostalgia. You carry the good memories with gratitude without demanding they become the present again. Seneca once wrote that he who is brave is free. And in this context, bravery is the courage to live according to your evolving nature, even when it takes you away from familiar faces. Freedom is not just the absence of chains imposed by others, it is also the absence of chains you place on yourself through fear of change. The Stoic way is to move forward without chains, to keep your peace by refusing to tie your worth to who still walks beside you, to leave the door unlocked but your foundations unshaken, to direct your energy into the life you have now rather than spending it trying to reanimate the life you once had. And perhaps most importantly, the Stoic knows that their journey will continue to bring new people into their life, people who fit the current shape of their values and aspirations. By letting go of those who belong to earlier chapters, you make room for the companions meant for the pages ahead. When you look back, you will see that the act of outgrowing someone was not about ending a relationship. It was about preserving your growth. It was about remaining true to yourself while still holding space for respect, compassion, and gratitude. Now, if any part of this message has been helpful to you, leave us your like and comment, helping the algorithm recommend it to someone who needs it at this time. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss new videos. And if you look through the videos we've already uploaded, you're sure to find something to take with you. Have a good day.